Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Wednesday morning. It is Wednesday, July 29th, 2026. Great to be with you on a Wednesday and every day here at EWTN's Catholic Connection, Monday through Friday. Hope you're having a beautiful day so far. It is going to be very warm in parts of the country, and more storms are expected. We will give you the weather forecast in just a second. Excited to speak with our dear friend Joan Lewis today as well, because she has been following closely a number of different stories out of the Vatican, including this beautiful concert that's going on today. The Holy Father is actually going back to Castel Gandolfo, even though he wrapped up his time of R&R on Monday. He's going back there for a beautiful concert this evening with a youth choir from the Andrea Bocelli Foundation, and the maestro himself will be there singing with those young people. What an amazing opportunity for just such beauty and lovely music, and in such a grand location. So we will learn about that as well. I'm kind of going backwards. I'm left-handed, can't help it. And then we'll also be talking about a big case. I don't know if you saw this story, but it's out there now, and we've been covering it as well on our various news outlets. But we're going to be checking in with the Thomas More Society, and we're going to talk about another big pro-life win for a father who won a case against a previous administration and the Department of Justice under the Biden administration after his arrest for allegedly violating the FACE Act. It's a big, big win, and it makes a real statement in terms of our religious freedoms. And then again, as I mentioned, Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. A couple of items I want to discuss with you today. I may talk about a beautiful place that Deacon Dominic and I discovered before we came back to the States, and that is the lovely Tuscan town of Pienza. Tuscany, unfortunately, has suffered similarly to what the Amalfi Coast has been going through in the region of Campania, just excessive tourism to the point where you can't even walk in some places. It's so crowded. But there is a little town that still has a Tuscan charm and beautiful churches, and one of which is dedicated to St. Francis and has a special display about St. Francis in the year of St. Francis as a church where you can receive one of the indulgences. But just a pretty little town on the Umbrian border, and I would highly recommend it. So we'll talk about that and maybe some other items. And don't forget, we have that beautiful EWTN series done by our mission advancement team on St. Francis that is free. It's called The Unknown St. Francis. Now, Francis is known, but there are many places in his life around Italy that are not, places that were very important to his ministry and his own Christian formation. And we talk about that in this beautiful series, which again is free. EWTN.com/St. Francis. And if you'd like to make a donation to the network, by doing so, you will get a copy of my brand new book, Volume 2 of Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Discovering Sacred Spaces and Fascinating Places in the Life of St. Francis of Assisi. Hour number 2, I'm going to be joined by my dear friend, a very close friend. I also call her my sister. We're very, very close. We've been besties for years. We have been on the phone this morning. We've been emailing back and forth. We are very upset about the media and their culpability, which is becoming even more transparent with the hearings that are going on right now in Washington, where Dr. Anthony Fauci is testifying, brought in by subpoena, not voluntarily, over documents, over 1,000 pages of documents. People are referring to them as diaries when they're actually written on a government computer during the whole COVID crisis. And there's so many contradictory statements that he made, writing things to himself and then saying the opposite in public. But what we'll concentrate on in our 2 cents segment is how the media just embraced him and pushed out any other voice, any other opinion. It was only Dr. Fauci with whom they could speak and with whom anyone could actually have any type of conversation on what was happening with COVID. So we'll talk about that in our 2 cents segment. And Vanessa's going to share a story about how she was treated by her, whom she thought were her longtime friends in secular media here in the southeastern Michigan area. Because you remember, Vanessa and I were friends. We first became friends when we were street reporters in Detroit. And she just raised a question on Facebook. Okay, let's see what Anthony Fauci has to say, of course. But what about other medical experts? Why aren't we talking to other people? Why is there only one singular source on this worldwide story that's affecting everyone around the world, right? Everybody, in every circumstance. And she says there are reporters that still don't talk to her today because she asked them, since when do we only use one source, especially in such a big story? So we'll discuss. And then wrapping up, of course, with Michael O'Neill. This will be really interesting. There is a new story that we're looking at, actually two stories. One related to appearances of the Virgin Mary that the church is now investigating, and another relating to a statue in southern Italy of Padre Pio. Taking a look at when we see these types of phenomenon happening, how the church looks into it, doesn't ignore it, but takes the time to investigate before declaring it becoming a miracle. So, perfect person to talk to about these situations, Michael O'Neill and the Miracle Hunter, of course, here on EWTN. Let's take a look at the weather. As I mentioned, we still have some issues. We have dangerous and extreme heat remaining across portions of the southern part of the country. Heavy rainfall bringing significant flash flooding across portions of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and that will be through this evening. And then we have additional flash flooding concerns across New England today. And we have heavy thunderstorms bringing another flash flood-like risk to the Four Corners region, especially to the burn scar area. So keep that in mind. Already 6 minutes past the hour. You are listening to EWTN's Catholic Connection. Let's get started with the news at 6 minutes, as I said, past the hour on a Wednesday. At least 13 people, officials say, have now been confirmed dead in yesterday's major earthquake in Japan. The quake, initially reported as magnitude 7.1 but later revised to 6.8, hit just as rush hour was getting underway in the southern portion of the country. Several buildings collapsed, including a shopping mall that left people trapped inside. Several people are still also unaccounted for, and aftershocks have been felt in the region along the coast, and thousands still remain without power. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia launching airstrikes on Iranian-backed groups in Iraq. The attacks carried out late yesterday come after Iran launched ballistic missiles at U.S. forces in the Mideast, and in a post on X, U.S. Central Command saying all of the missiles were successfully intercepted. President Trump bid farewell to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham yesterday while speaking at Graham's funeral service at Washington's National Cathedral. The president calling Graham a beloved friend and a giant of the U.S. Senate.
Lindsey rose from a small town in rural South Carolina, a place he loved so much, to become a constant fixture of American politics at the highest level.
Trump listing some of Graham's biggest accomplishments also as a U.S. Senator.
He secured record funding for our military as a budget committee chairman. He delivered the largest investment in border security in history, and last year he shepherded the passage of the largest tax cuts in American history.
Trump also praising Graham's sister, Darlene, who was appointed to serve the remainder of his term. The president saying Graham lived to the fullest and died doing the work he was born to do. The president going on to say their relationship evolved over the years into a very close friendship, with the two bonding over their love of golf. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle packing the cathedral for the service, along with several world leaders. Graham passing away unexpectedly on July 11th at the age of 71. And Mark Mayfield tells us a sanctions bill sponsored by the late Senator Graham is receiving bipartisan support.
The bill would double the amount of tariffs on countries that continue buying Russian oil and gas. It would also renew sanctions on Iran that were set to expire at the end of the year. On Tuesday night, the bill passed in the Senate on an 86-12 procedural vote. Final passage in the Senate is expected late this week. The vote came shortly after the funeral of the late Republican senator. President Trump has indicated he will support the measure. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Currently happening in Washington right now, Dr. Anthony Fauci is testifying in the Senate today. The hearing began at 8:30 regarding newly released documents and past statements on COVID-19. Now, the documents were 1,000 pages of his pandemic-era writings and contradict his public statements, according to Paul Rand, on COVID-19's origin. Now, the comments are considered government records, and they were created on a government computer by a federal employee. Fauci was subpoenaed last month by Senator Paul of Kentucky, chair of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, after refusing to testify voluntarily regarding his role in setting policy during the pandemic. Among those those gathered in the hearing room, according to the New York Post this morning, is CIA whistleblower James Erdman III, who claimed to the same panel back in May that Fauci improperly influenced intelligence analysis about the origins of COVID to downplay findings that it most likely resulted from a lab accident in China. Officials are investigating after they say more than 30 water systems across the state of Minnesota were targeted in a coordinated cyber attack. Cybersecurity specialist Bryce Austin says the attack over the weekend on Sunday and Monday was designed to be destructive, plain and simple, he says.
It's a wake-up call to all critical infrastructure in all states. We need to be prepared for cyber attacks. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Officials, however, say the drinking water does remain safe, and most affected residents have not been asked to change their water use. Minnesota IT Services, working with state and federal agencies, including the FBI, as investigators assess the impact and help affected communities restore operations. Officials say the focus now is strengthening defenses against future cyber threats. And in the race for Senate in Texas, Democrat James Tallarico has been using what he claims is his Christian faith as a way to attract moderate Republicans. But at a rally north of Dallas, his opponent, Ken Paxton, this week, pointing out how his actions and the issues he supports raise some serious concerns.
How he concocts this idea that the Bible is pro-abortion. I'm still trying to figure out the argument, but he makes it.
Tallarico also openly supports men playing in women's sports. During a debate on legislation banning women in women's sports, he said God is non-binary and there are 6 genders. He also has co-authored DEI-related legislation and opposed restrictions on so-called gender-affirming care, arguing it is not child abuse. Florida's Catholic bishops are urging state residents to work to bring about an end to the death penalty, describing it as a culture of death and incompatible with a full Catholic understanding of the value of human life. EWTNnews.com recording the 8 leaders, including the Archbishop of Miami, Thomas Wensky, issuing the message amid large numbers of executions in Florida. The state executing 19 condemned prisoners back in 2025, helping drive a rise in capital punishment throughout the United States. Pope Leo, having just concluded his vacation at Castel Gandolfo in Italy, returning there, as we mentioned at the top of the hour, and Joan Lewis will be mentioning this. He'll be returning there today for a beautiful musical prayer service featuring tenor Andrea Bocelli. As announced on July 27th by the Holy See Press Office, Holy Father will lead a moment of prayer at the Canticle of Peace, sponsored by the Andrea Bocelli Foundation, ABF, and hosted by the Borgo Laudatio Si, which is part of the Pontifical Gardens at Castel Gandolfo. The Holy Father will have recently concluded his vacation, of course, there, having stayed from July 5th all the way through Monday, July 27th. The music featuring Bocelli and the ABF Voices of Choir, made up of 164 children and young people from war-torn regions in an effort to promote peace through song. And again, that is this evening in the Castel Gandolfo area, which is south of Rome. The Senate has voted to make Jay Clayton the next director of national intelligence. It was a 51-47 party line vote yesterday. Clayton is a former Securities and Exchange Commission chair and currently U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And the Federal Reserve is expected to announce its interest rate decisions today. Several federal officials have recently expressed concern about persistently high inflation, and a majority of investors polled believe the Fed will hold rates steady. President Trump, meanwhile, calling for an interest rate cut. It is a Wednesday. We appreciate your listenership. A big pro-life breaking story we're covering for you, and a victory, a big pro-life victory. We'll explain with the Thomas More Society up next. Thanks so much for listening to EWTN's Catholic Connection, middle of the week, the last week of July. An honor to have Steve Crampton with us, Senior Counsel for the amazing Thomas More Society. And there's a big pro-life victory that's been reported. And if you haven't heard about it, we will give you the full story here. Reading a lead from a couple of the news stories that are out there from the more conservative websites. A Christian father of 11 reaching a settlement with the Department of Justice after facing up to 10 years in prison for protesting at a Tennessee abortion facility in March of 2021. He was originally convicted of violating the FACE Act, a federal law that prohibits threats or force of obstruction or inflict property damage intended to interfere with reproductive health care services. That's a quote from the act. The 1994 law was used by former President Joe Biden's Justice Department to aggressively persecute pro-life activists following the overturning of Roe v. Wade in June of 2022. So, Steve, take us back. What happened? And this is a huge, huge pro-life victory. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us.
Well, amen. Thank you for having us. The lead, as you said, is that we were able to reach a very favorable settlement with the Department of Justice over the wrongs that have been inflicted on Paul Vaughn. But to take it back into October of 2022, if you'll recall, it was June of 22 when the Supreme Court finally reversed Roe against Wade and the left went apoplectic. Right. So the Biden team basically enlisted every asset they had and devoted virtually untold resources to going after pro-lifers. So first week of October, Paul Vaughn was arrested at gunpoint in front of his wife and 7 children that were still at home, and hauled off in cuffs to the jail in Nashville and charged, as you said, with both a misdemeanor FACE violation, the actual so-called obstruction, which, of course, Paul never obstructed, but then they threw on, for the first time in our nation's history, the felony conspiracy against rights, the KKK Act holdover that claimed that he and others were conspiring, ironically, to deprive the pro-abort women of their federal rights, which, of course, neither the Constitution nor federal law recognizes. So depriving Paul of his First Amendment rights in the name of a fake deprivation of rights on the conspiracy charge. And then he was convicted of on both counts. We were aggressively pursuing an appeal when President Trump graciously pardoned Paul and the other pro-lifers in January of 25. So this lawsuit claim filed back in July of 25, resulting in this settlement. So we are obviously very pleased for Paul and his family. Maybe they can put some of their pieces back together again and help their kids with the trauma that they endured. But I think more importantly, as you're probably aware, Teresa, the Trump Department of Justice has exposed the extraordinary abuse of power by the Biden administration in these reports, including the weaponization of the FACE Act report, which kind of gave rise to this claim in the first place. And we just see how politicized and completely untethered we have become as a nation with regard to folks just pursuing their own private agendas. So praise God for the DOJ doing the right thing here.
So 2 questions, Steve. And by the way, if you're just joining us, Steve Crampton is with us. He's senior counsel for the Thomas More Society, talking about a victory, a big pro-life victory for a pro-life father who won a case against a previous administration after his arrest in 2000, a few years ago, 2022, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So this case is very similar to another pro-life dad, the one involving, which was also so egregious in terms of arrested at his home, woke up, they wake up the family and DEA shows up. All these agents show up banging on the door with bulletproof vests, very dramatic. And that was a case of Mark Houck. So then we have this is a second really big victory with Paul, correct? Very similar to the other case.
Very true. Yes. As a matter of fact, and we represented Mark Houck as well in that case. So, yeah.
What happens under a new administration? Could this decision be changed? These decisions involving both fathers?
Great question. No, they cannot. But what they can do, of course, is go back to weaponizing the FACE Act and abusing their authority, which is one reason why we continue to press pretty hard for the entire repeal of the FACE Act. And we have some friends on the Hill, like Chip Roy in the House and Senator Lee in the Senate, but it hasn't really gained traction. And I'm afraid that, it remains a lethal weapon just sort of lying there to be picked up, as you say, by the next administration.
Apparently, in this arrest too, it was so dramatic and frightening. 3 of the children were basically held at gunpoint by an agent in the yard.
Yes, it's really an extraordinary thing because it's as if I think they knew the routine that Paul's family undertook. They were part of a homeschool co-op. This was a Friday morning when they attend co-op. So some of the kids were already outside waiting on Dad and the rest of the family to come out to the car. And the agent showed up, corralled these 3 kids into the side of the yard, and held them again, more or less at gunpoint, while they continued with the arrest and takedown of Paul at the front door. So, the trauma that these kids endured and
right.
the angst and, just kind of the thoughts of are law enforcement folks good or are they evil here kind of stuff is really hard to calculate. And, of course, money doesn't really solve that. But there's only so much that the Trump administration could do, and I think they really did an extraordinary job in trying to right the wrongs of the Biden administration and to expose them so that in the future, hopefully, this is not repeated ever again.
This was all meant for drama, and they knew the media would pick it up and run with it and paint this man and his family as evil people, and this is what we do to people who don't kowtow to our agenda. But here's the thing. I've covered so many crime stories in my many years as a secular reporter long before I came into Catholic media. There is no reason they had to approach it this way. They could go up. They could. The guy wasn't being accused of killing 20 people, God forbid, or something like that. Go up, knock on the door. We need to take you in for questioning. We need to arrest you right now. Do it quietly. Don't traumatize the family. I'm not saying it was right that they arrested him, but there was a way that they could have approached this much more, I think, calmly.
So true. We would love to have pursued that in discovery, and unfortunately we didn't get there. But, yeah, the FBI agent that supervised this arrest quickly left the force voluntarily.
Oh, gee,
after
shocker.
That. So, yeah. Ironically, he's now like security at some Christian university. So beware there, too. Right?
Wow. So what does this say to those of us? Because I think these kinds of stories, unfortunately, don't get out beyond a lot of the, conservative outlets, Catholic media, evangelical media, and people simply do not know what has gone on and what will go on under different types of governments, depending on where they stand on these crucial issues.
Yes, I really do. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think, it's a reminder of the old adage that eternal vigilance is basically the cost of our liberties. We cannot go to sleep, whether it's President Trump in office or another Biden or who knows what may follow. We have got to watch the watchers. And the reports that have been released, there are several now, one on religious liberty, too, by the Trump DOJ, really need to be studied and mastered because it's basically a blueprint for how they did it before, and we've got to prevent them from doing it again.
Right. And that's readily available right on the DOJ website. So and there's a summary of that report, of the religious committee report, which is very quick to read and some excellent points and has many of the testimonies in a very, I would say, condensed form. So that will be a real eye-opener for people if they don't believe this is going on, in addition to stories like this with Paul and Mark, which we know made big news in the Christian world. Thank you so much for your great work at the Thomas More Society. Really appreciate it, Steve. God bless you. And we've been following also the big case in California with Heartbeat International. We're doing updates on that. We'll be right back. Shrines and Wonders Wednesday coming up, taking you to the beautiful Tuscan town of Pienza. I love this music. I want to hear something funny. I love the way the Lord works. So, Steve Crampton, our guest, of course, in the last segment from Thomas More Society, heard me talking about Pienza in Tuscany. And he said to me during the break, I'm going to Pienza in 2 weeks. My son recommended it. So we were talking about how beautiful it is now. I was told about Pienza by my dear friend, John Hale from Corporate Travel, and he said, you have to go, T. It is right up your alley. It is so quaint. It's much quieter than the other touristy towns in Tuscany. So I've had kind of an issue with Tuscany and the Amalfi Coast recently because as someone who was always trying to recommend off the beaten path, right? My Italy books are all about that. Now, of course, I take you to the big places. In the first book, Volume 1 of Shrines and Wonders, I'm talking about Rome. I'm talking about Florence. I do the whole thing on the Amalfi Coast. We talk about Venice. We talk about all of these big places. These are must-dos if you're going to Italy, no doubt. But unfortunately, I always try to be very honest with my clients, not to be a Debbie Downer, but okay, if you're going especially in the summer, which is the worst time to go because of the crowds, because of all the Europeans who vacation in the summertime, especially in August, and also because of the heat. It is just really oppressive and exhausting if you're trying to tour during the heat. And of course, I'm always trying to give people the best advice. And if you want to experience a real Italy, okay, go see the big places. Obviously, you need to see the David. You need to see the Duomos. You need to see the Ponte Vecchio and maybe have a drink along the Arno. I totally get it, and I advise that as well. But if you want that real experience, you need to discover these places that give you a real slice of Italian life and also have beautiful churches which many people don't visit because they get caught up in the large cities. And so we always like to spend our weekends, now that we live in Italy part-time, to discover something new. And there's so much to discover. We've been going to Italy this is 2026, for almost 26 years now. And it is amazing to me how much there still is to see, especially in terms of shrines and churches and just amazing things to experience. And so I wanted to try out this town because it wasn't too far from us, actually. We live kind of on the border of, we're in Umbria, but we're on the border of Umbria and Tuscany. Umbria is still my favorite because it really is the real Italy. But I said, okay, we'll give Tuscany another chance. Now, last year, we decided we were having lunch above Lago di Tresemino, which is also on the border of Tuscany and Umbria. It is a beautiful lake, very popular with people in Umbria and eastern Tuscany, so they don't have to go all the way out to the coast to get some water sports and vacation by the water. It has a lot of boating and different things, and there's Isla Maggiore that you can go, and St. Francis spent a whole Lent there shortly before he died, so it's a really pretty place to go. But we were sitting there having lunch in Castellano del Lago, which is above Lago di Tresemino, and saying, we're like 25 minutes from Montepulciano, which is a big tourist town. It's not a big town, but it's a big tourist town famous for its wine. We haven't been there in like 15 years. Let's go back. I was so disappointed. It was so pretty the first time we went to Montepulciano and Montepulciano. And now, unfortunately, that little wine town has turned into pretty much a giant T-shirt shop. Very similar, unfortunately, to the Amalfi Coast. And so when my friend John told me about Pienza, he said, you will love this tea. You will absolutely love it. And he was right. So Pienza is only about 90 minutes from Umbria. And it's known for a number of things. Great wines, of course, especially red wines. But they also produce some really good white wines, including sparkling white wine. But what it's really known for is its pecorino cheese in addition to its beauty. And it also, by the way, is a World Heritage Site in the Val d'Orcia. It was founded by Pope Pius in the 15th century and is actually a place of all kinds of artistic events as well. They have many galleries and many art shows. But if you go to visittuscany.com and if you look up Pienza, you'll see this image. And it is so pretty because the city is walled and it sits above, as I said, the Val d'Orcia. And the city is known, again, for several things, including its food products such as cheese. Pienza. So let me read a little bit. An ideal city founded based on beauty. Pienza is a gem in the Val d'Orcia, and of course a huge Catholic connection, very important to us obviously, known as the city of Pope Pius II, who was born there in 1405. Once he became Pope, he wanted to transform his humble birthplace, Corsignano, into an urban architectural treasure. Therefore, he entrusted the total renovation of the village to the architect Bernardo Rossellino. Okay? And in just 4 years, from 1459 to 1462, they define the harmonious and typically 15th century appearance of present-day Pienza. So it is a beautiful place. It's a kind of place where you can go and, stroll the streets. And we were there in, we came home to the States on the 20th. We were there the weekend before. And it was a pretty hot day, but it was nice because it wasn't overly crowded. There were people, and the restaurants were full, but it wasn't to the point where you couldn't move or you felt overwhelmed by the crowds. Now, it's important to note that it was recognized as a World Heritage Site. And by the way, in the Cathedral of the Assumption, you can find important and remarkable paintings by several artists of the time. And there's a lovely bell tower that stands above a crypt that is centuries old. Inside the former School of San Carlo, you can find the Archaeological Museum of Pienza, a building of medieval origin, with archaeological and Etruscan collections on display. Now, this is something that is so crazy amazing about that part of Italy and the influence of the Etruscans. There is so much history there in terms of going back and tracing the roots of those who were in Italy in the early days. The Romans, of course, the Etruscans were before the Romans, but there's nowhere you could go in Italy and not find a museum, a church, a building with something that is so historic and worth seeing. So my suggestion, if you have Tuscany on your Italy bucket list, and by the way, you can still buy all the famous red wine that they offer in Tuscany, right, that people, are looking for, but you don't have to go to the crowded places, the commercial places. You can get great cheese, you can get great sausages and meats, you can get the experience of Tuscany, have a real old Tuscany feel without the craziness, without the crowds, and head over to Pienza. Now, here's the other cool thing about Pienza. It's a great place to visit for a day. I mean, it's beautiful to stay overnight, especially the views of the Val d'Orcia. But you could visit it easily from Florence, a little bit further from Siena, or even if you're staying, let's say, in Cortona, which is a beautiful Tuscan city. That's another lovely place. And, of course, St. Rita of Cortona, St. Margaret of Cortona as well. Great place to visit, Cortona, Pienza, but concentrating on Pienza because we were just there 2 weeks ago. And, of course, because of the Catholic connection, known as the city of Pope Pius II. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Always lovely to speak with my dear friend Joan Lewis, and she has spent some time recently in Castel Gandolfo, of course, where the Pope just wrapped up his R&R, rest and relaxation, vacation, but he's going back there because there's a beautiful concert with the one and only Andrea Bocelli and the choir of 164 young people from around the world. So, Joni, you did some more discovering of Castel Gandolfo. Lucky you. How was it?
Absolutely unreal. Because I'd been there before. Right. I like a lot of other people, you go for a couple hours, half a day, whatever. But I was there overnight, 3 nights. And the thing is, I've been there. I know the town. I know the environs. I've eaten in so many good restaurants. And I've been many, many times inside the Apostolic Palace. My first visit was, when I started working at the Vatican in the 90s. And the Cardinal... American Cardinal who headed the Vatican was able to get me a driver one day. I wanted to do an article for the Vatican Information Service on the papal residence. John Paul was away. He was away on vacation in northern Italy, but he was going to be coming to Castel Gandolfo. And so anyway, I got a car and a driver, went out there, and Saverio Petrillo was at the time And when he retired, it was a total of 55 years. He was the director of the papal villas. So the villa and then Villa Barberini, where the Pope is, has been in the past, and the papal gardens and the papal farm, everything. And so I spent 5 of the most glorious hours imaginable exploring every room in the papal palace, the apostolic palace. So to go back this weekend and just be part of the people, sit down at some of the, wonderful restaurants and have a Prosecco as the sun is setting and et cetera, et cetera. But what did I discover? So I get there Friday night, and I went to the main town square. It was like 100 feet from my hotel. And I get to the main town square, and I think it was 8 o'clock or something. And I had a Prosecco, and all of a sudden there's all kinds of people populating the square, and I'm hearing something about peaches. And then what do I see the next day and Sunday? But the 90th Castel Gandolfo Peach Festival. So they have this every year, and, obviously peaches grown in the neighborhood. But the main part this year, this was such fun. The main part this year was a bake-off in the main square.
How fun.
Oh, I know. Art Shaw, who's a chef from Chicago, he was in town for a number of days. And he has a whole bunch of restaurants in Chicago. The chef Art Smith. And so he and another Chicago chef will eventually, seems it'll be spring next year, be opening a restaurant in the Villa Barberini part of Castel Gandolfo. And so he was in town, and this is all part of this program of Laudato Si, where one of the things Laudato Si offers are cooking classes to people who, are down and out, but don't have a trade. Okay, so let's go back to the weekend. And so there's a table set up in the square, beautiful flowers, and all the contents to make peach cobbler. And then there's 2 tables, one on either side of Chef Smith, and there's 2 Italian grandmothers and their granddaughters. They were probably 10 or 11 years old. And so they're going to have the big bake-off. They have all the same thing. They have flowers, and they have all the ingredients. And so the chef, with the help of a translator, he explains the recipe, and as he's putting things together, the grandmothers are putting things, and granddaughters putting things together. And so then the idea was this is going to be a contest. And so it began about 6 o'clock, and they were pretty much ready to put stuff in the oven at 6:30, but they were going to break it up because everybody was reminded to go to Mass. Well, church was like, 60 feet away. So I went. They had said, come back after Mass, there will be announced the winner. Well, it didn't work out that way. It was actually a lot better. So after Mass, there were still people, oh my gosh, games for kids, music galore that lasted till like 11 at night. And it was decided that the that the contest would be announced on the results on Sunday. So, same thing. After Mass, we came out. The Mass was celebrated to mark 400 years of popes coming to Castel Gandolfo. And then after Mass, the pastor came out, and he blessed a whole bunch of boxes and boxes of peaches. And then we all went over to an area near the pharmacy where they were going to announce the winner. And so the chef was there, and a jury of 5, including 2 priests, one French-Italian and another from Chicago who work at Laudato Si. So the announcement comes, and the prizes are given out, and Chef Smith signed a hat for the first winner, and then, second place. But and then, this was the amazing part, Teresa. In the meantime, since this all started on Saturday, the chef and others, and he had an assistant coming in from Chicago, they made enough peach cobbler to practically fill all of Castel, to feed Castel Gandolfo. They made peach cobblers for several hundred people. And people were lining up after Mass. I was one of them, but I took a whole bunch of pictures from my Facebook page. So people were lining up after Mass at the table to find out who the winner was, and then to sample the peach cobbler, which was topped with ice cream. So several hundred people walking around the main square.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just so much fun. And then music and games and kids. I mean, their entire families were out. From 2 on up, the kids were playing games. If you could stand and walk and you were about 2, you were playing a game on the square.
Well, something like that is just so charming. And those are the types of events and activities that you and I both, as people who love Italy so much and know so much about it, encourage people to do. And it really is a beautiful expression of faith and family. And somehow, there's always a connection to the church. And tonight, the Holy Father is going back to Castel Gandolfo for this beautiful concert with Andrea Bocelli.
Well, and I had learned about those things, and I did mention them on my segment with Jim and Joy on Monday, because I learned about these things just off the cuff, talking to my friends who work at Laudato Si. And so there's 160 young people from 5 different countries that are experiencing war and violence. Italy is one of them, but it's one of the countries that is giving singers. There's a choir. It's 160 young people. I think the ages are something like 9 to 16 or 18, something like that. And so they will sing. Andrea Bocelli is there tonight, and they will be. They have created their version of St. Francis's peace, prayer, and so it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful evening. And the one thing that did delight me was that it was cooler than Rome, because Rome has been in the mid to high 90s,
right?
And of course, the humidity has been pretty bad. But Castel Gandolfo was totally delightful. It was probably in 80 to 84, something else like that. So it was a time. I mean, if the Pope wants to get a little bit cooler, that's the right place. But I'm also assuming that the Apostolic Palace, part of it at least, is air conditioned. Oh, but on Sunday at the Angelus, this was amazing. First of all, if you know Castel Sant'Angelo, there's a whole bunch of bars and coffee bars, restaurants on the main square. Okay, then there's a street that goes straight out from the square, Corso Repubblica. And as far as you can walk, I don't know how many blocks, I don't know if it's a kilometer or what, the street's only about 20, 25 feet across. It's not traffic. And there's tables and restaurants. Well, I want to tell you, I don't know what time it began, probably Saturday night. That street was totally cleared of tables and chairs. Those are the security measures that they take. Because I'm looking out the window at 8:30, and people are already of my apartment, and they were already walking to the square. So I got there about 10:30, and it was very, very filled. And I did go into a place to get in shade briefly and have some orange juice and stuff just to get going for the day. But at the end of the Angelus, who comes up to the Holy Father with a peach cobbler, but Chef Smith and his assistant from Chicago.
Cute.
Oh, and it's on the video. All you have to do is go to the Vatican website, because the video of the Angelus shows this. And there's a whole bunch of other people involved in organizing this peach festival every year, and some of them are dressed in local costumes. Again, it's just exactly what you said. All these festivals that might occur in the name of a product like a food, and it can be wine or peaches or salami or what, or a saint. Obviously, you can have big festivals for saints, but they're so heartfelt, and people work so hard on this. But the Pope loved it, and then what was happening? The different people involved in organizing it, ranging from youngsters, probably 12 or 13, they came up, maybe a dozen of them, and each of them handed the Pope a peach, and then an assistant was putting them in a big basket. And then Chef Smith and his assistant of Italian origin, they came and presented the Pope with a cobbler. So I'm going to go out tomorrow morning and get peaches, and I'm going to make a cobbler and follow his recipe. But it was just such fun because I didn't plan any of this. I just thought, okay, I'll out to enjoy the peace and the beauty in Lake Albano, had some terrific meals, but then to become part of a festival and then see the two priests that I know that are so much involved with Laudato Si, to see them and have them part of the organization of this festival was just unexpected fun. So took tons of pictures, posted them, on my not on my blog because I had been having technical problems, but anyway, they're all on Facebook. So, but everybody, I think we said this last week. Everybody, when they come to Rome, add a day to your schedule.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
To go to Castel, and if it's a group, because it's hard to get there. So I admit I took a taxi, but if there's a small group, hire a 6 or 8 car van, or a family, something else like that. But just to get an idea of some of these towns, like the towns you talk about,
right? Mm-hmm.
And mentioning Pienza and other places. It's
such a different experience, and of course, not to promote the name of the show, but it just happens to work. There's always a Catholic connection to it because of the prominence of the Catholic faith, and it's so beautiful. Pienza was created by Pope Pius II, and the beauty and the architecture there and the location in the Val d'Orcia is just beyond beautiful. And I love Castel Gandolfo. I want to go over there and stay overnight, though, because as I've been there many times, but never spent the night there.
Oh, I'll tell you exactly where to go and where to stay and everything else. And, the hotel I wanted to stay in, I put off reserving until, of course, I had no more rooms. It was like a 2-minute walk from the square. And I found this apartment, one of the most eclectic places I've ever stayed in my life, but it was maybe a 45-second walk to the main square. and then everything else that I wanted to see, and all the restaurants and uphill and downhill and exploring, but just relaxing.
We have to run, but a great conversation, and we'll have more insight now as we look forward to watching the concert. I'm sure it'll be posted on the Vatican website with Andrea Bocelli and, of course, all those wonderful children from around the world, all about peace in the year of St. Francis. We'll be right back. Wow, this first hour went by fast. Thank you so much for tuning into Catholic Connection and EWTN Production. One story we didn't get to with Joni was this beautiful statement the Holy Father gave to communicators gathering for a big conference in Chile, talking about the importance of truth in AI. And so it ties in directly with our 2 Cents segment coming up in a few minutes in hour number 2 on EWTN's Radio Extra. Because the catechism, the various popes over the last, many, many years, including Benedict and Pope Paul VI and John Paul II and Pope Francis and now Pope Leo XIV, all stressing the importance of accurate media and giving us truth. The catechism, the section on social communications, is all about that. So that's why I thought it would be very important and hopefully insightful for you to bring on my friend Vanessa Denha-Garmo, of course, from Epiphany and Ave Maria Radio, and regular guest host for me here at Catholic Connection. She and I go way back in our secular media years, and we're totally frustrated with what's happening yet again with the secular press. And so we want to concentrate on the media's handling of not only the COVID story originally, but what's happening with this Senate hearing, which, by the way, there's an update. Dr. Fauci took the fifth this morning and pushed back against Rand Paul. Now, what is really sad to see is that this was written on a government computer. These are actual statements from Fauci. So where are the media talking to him and saying, okay, well, you told us this, but in the writings you said this. You told us this, and you said this. There has to be accountability. There has to be accuracy. And the media were totally culpable in the whole COVID controversy, something that impacted the entire world. That's coming up, plus a look at some possible new miracles being investigated by the Vatican. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tamio, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tamio.
Thank you for tuning in to hour number 2 here on EWTN's Radio Extra. We have another jam-packed hour for you. A ton of news, some breaking news, of course, in Washington. on the hearing involving Anthony Fauci and the GOP-led Senate panel investigating COVID-19. We'll talk about that, and we'll have that in the news, but we'll also have a discussion on the media's culpability in the COVID situation with Vanessa Denha-Garmo, of course, author, speaker, talk show host, guest host of Catholic Connection, and also experienced journalist. She and I have been really discussing this the last day or so when this whole story began to break over the weekend. And it is just so frustrating to us to see the media just basically taking the company line of the left and still embracing Fauci as a hero. And here's the thing. What they should be doing now is not taking anybody's side, but just asking, okay, here are these new documents. They're being referred to as his diary. However, they were written, all of these comments, these statements about COVID, actually very little about COVID, mainly about him and being interviewed by different people in the media and hanging out with the stars. The media should be questioning him about this. Okay, well, you said this to us, but then in your statements at the same time you were saying this to us publicly, you were writing something different. It was written on a government computer, so it's a government document. Didn't raid his house and get his diaries, okay? So there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. And I'm also going to ask Father Mitch about this tomorrow on our Cultural Connections, because we have to discern. The Holy Father, again, addressing the issue of truth in media when he sent comments to a communications conference that's going on in Chile, saying that when it comes to AI, we all deserve truth and reality, okay? So there were so many problems with the way COVID was handled. Think of all the people, first of all, who died. Think of the businesses that were closed. Think of all the families who couldn't be with their loved ones when they were dying in nursing homes or hospitals. Think of the fallout we're still facing from the epidemic of loneliness because of the isolation, and how children were struggling and are still struggling because of how they were kept from school and what was happening online with the schools. And it's just endless. And the media should be willing to ask the questions. I'm not saying they have to take the side of the Republicans or the side of the Democrats, but ask the questions. What is the truth? What is reality? And why was Fauci? And this is what Vanessa and I talked about privately with each other all the time. Why was he the only source the media would consider in terms of their source on these different stories? And anyone who challenged Fauci, and we felt it online, if we put up stories raising some questions, not attacking anybody, but just raising some questions, heaven forbid we were part of a right-wing conspiracy, when we were simply trying to do our jobs and ask questions. So I'll discuss that with Vanessa, and she has some stories about how she was attacked personally by people with whom she thought she had a strong friendship over many years of covering stories together in the secular media. And she posed the question about, why are we just looking at one source only for this massive story that's impacting the entire world? Well, you think she was a devil incarnate. She got shut down, she got blocked, she got attacked, and so did many other people who ask questions. So that's what we're talking about this morning. Not about taking sides, not about particular parties, but about the questions that were not asked and are still not being asked in light of this hearing of the secular media. And fine, ask Rand Paul why he's bringing this out now. How did this happen? How did you get this material? Yes, ask those questions. But ask the questions. Don't dismiss it as some conspiracy when his own statements contradict consistently what he was saying at the time. Two different versions. And how can you ignore his connection to research that was going on in the labs in China and the money he was making? This is basic journalism 101. Ask the questions. So we'll discuss in 2 cents. And then Michael O'Neill joins us, the miracle hunter. You know him well from his work at EWTN. There are 2 very interesting stories from Europe regarding miracles that are now being investigated by the church. One involving our Blessed Mother in Germany, another involving a statue of Padre Pio in southern Italy. So pretty exciting hour. Let's take a look at the weather and see what's happening. We need to pay attention because we have extreme heat that's coming up in several parts of the country. So wanted to let you know about that, and also some more storms. Dangerous and extreme heat will remain across portions of the southern U.S. this week. Heavy rainfall may bring significant flash flooding across portions of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast through the night, and additional flash flooding concerns across New England on Wednesday. And we have monsoonal thunderstorms will bring a flash flood risk, a big one to the Four Corners area, especially in burn scar locations. So keep that in mind if you're in any of those affected areas. 6 minutes past the hour already. It is a Wednesday morning, middle of the week, June 29th. Let's check the news for you on a Wednesday. Well, at least 13 people now have been confirmed dead in yesterday's major earthquake in Japan. The quake initially reported as magnitude 7.1, but later revised to 6.8, and it struck just as rush hour was getting underway on the country's southern coastal area. Several buildings collapsed, including a shopping mall that left people trapped inside. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia launching airstrikes on Iranian-backed groups in Iraq. The attacks carried out late yesterday after Iran launched ballistic missiles at U.S. forces in the Middle East. And in a post on X, U.S. Central Command said all of the missiles were successfully intercepted. President Trump bid farewell to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham while speaking at his funeral service in Washington's National Cathedral yesterday. The president calling Graham a beloved friend and a giant of the U.S. Senate.
Lindsey rose from a small town in rural South Carolina, a place he loved so much, to become a constant fixture of American politics at the highest level.
Trump listing some of Graham's biggest accomplishments as senator as well.
He secured record funding for our military as a budget committee chairman. He delivered the largest investment in border security in history, and last year he shepherded the passage of the largest tax cuts in American history.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle packing the cathedral for the service, along with several world leaders, Graham passing away unexpectedly on July 11th at the age of 71. And Mark Mayfield tells us a sanctions bill sponsored by the late Senator Graham is receiving bipartisan support.
The bill would double the amount of tariffs on countries that continue buying Russian oil and gas. It would also renew sanctions on Iran that were set to expire at the end of the year. On Tuesday night, the bill passed in the Senate on an 86-12 procedural vote. Final passage in the Senate is expected late this week. The vote came shortly after the funeral of the late Republican senator. President Trump has indicated he will support the measure. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, and we'll be talking about this and the media's handling of this big story with Vanessa Denha-Garmo coming up in 2 cents, declining this morning to answer senators' questions at a hearing on the oranges of COVID and the government's handling of the pandemic. He said in prepared remarks he would invoke his Fifth Amendment rights not to testify to avoid the possibility that Republicans could try to use his testimony to prosecute him for perjury. Fauci was subpoenaed to testify in the Senate today with the hearing over newly released government documents contradicting past statements on COVID's origin and potential criminal penalties again for lying to Congress. Senator Rand Paul says there are some 1,000 pages of Fauci's pandemic-era writings that contradict his public statements on COVID-19's origin. His written comments are considered government records as they were created on a government computer by a federal employee. Among those gathered at the hearing room this morning, CIA whistleblower James Erdman, who claimed to the same panel back in May that Fauci improperly influenced intelligence analysis about the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic to downplay findings that it most likely resulted from a laboratory accident in China. Officials are investigating after they say more than 30 water systems across Minnesota were targeted in a coordinated cyber attack. Cybersecurity specialist Bryce Austin says the attack on Sunday and Monday designed to be destructive, plain and simple.
Structure in all states. We need to be prepared for cyber attacks. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Officials say drinking water remains safe and most affected residents have not been asked to change their water use. Minnesota IT Services working with state and federal agencies, including the FBI, as investigators access or assess the impact and help affected communities restore operations. In the race for Senate in the big state of Texas, Democrat James Tallarico has been using what he claims is his Christian faith as a way to try to attract moderate Republicans. But at a rally recently in Dallas, his opponent, Ken Paxton, pointing out how his actions and the issues he supports raise some serious concerns.
How he concocts this idea that the Bible is pro-abortion. I'm still trying to figure out the argument, but he makes it.
Tallarico also supporting men playing in women's sports, and he said there are 6 genders as well. He has also co-authored DEI-related legislation and opposes restrictions on so-called gender-affirming care, claiming that it's not child abuse. Florida's Catholic bishops are urging state residents to work to bring about an end to the death penalty, describing it, as EWTNnews.com explains, as a culture of death and incompatible with the full Catholic understanding of the value of human life. The 8 leaders, including the Archbishop of Miami, Thomas Wensky, issuing the message amid large numbers of executions in Florida. The state executed 19 condemned prisoners last year, helping drive a rise in capital punishment throughout the country. And Linda Bordoni from Vatican News reports the Holy Father continues to urge communicators to place every technological tool at the service of truth and the common good.
The seminar, entitled The Challenges of Artificial Intelligence, has brought together communicators, pastoral workers, academics and church representatives from across Latin America and the Caribbean to reflect on the ethical, cultural and religious implications of artificial intelligence in the light of Pope Leo XIV's encyclical Magnificat Humanitas. In his message to participants, the Pope expresses the hope that they will promote a communication that, in the face of the new opportunities offered by technological development, knows how to safeguard the dignity of the human person and place every tool at the service of truth and the common good. Entrusting the seminar to the guidance of the Holy Spirit, he prays that it may address the challenges posed by artificial intelligence with wisdom and responsibility, so that ecclesial communication may foster encounter among people and contribute to the proclamation of the gospel. Opening the seminar, Cardinal Fernando Ciomali, Archbishop of Santiago del Chile, reflected on the impact of social media, describing them as truly human spaces because, he said, they reflect emotions, relationships and conflicts. Everything that happens to us also happens there, he said, proposing 4 essential criteria for communication: truth, goodness, beauty and usefulness. Communication rooted in those principles, he said, can strengthen community life in an increasingly individualistic society. We will promote dialogue. We will promote fraternity. In the end, he concluded, we will build Jerusalem, not Babel.
Pope Leo, speaking of Pope Leo, having just concluded his vacation at Castel Gandolfo in Italy, returning there, as we heard with Joan Lewis earlier in the program, for a musical prayer service featuring the renowned Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli. This beautiful concert will involve 164 children and young people, in addition to Bocelli's beautiful voice, the young people from war-torn regions, in an effort to promote peace through song in the year of the Saint of Peace, St. Francis of Assisi. We'll be right back. "15 minutes past the hour, T's 2 cents. Pope Leo XIV, in his beautiful encyclical on the magnificence of humanity, talked about artificial intelligence and stressed the fact that he even said it in, as you heard in the news, in an address that he, a written address that he made to journalists and communicators gathering in Chile for a big conference, that we have to have the truth, that always the media, whatever we use, whether it be AI and other forms of media, always has to be at the service of the human person, the dignity of the human person, and the common good, with truth at the center of it all. And this is all that we're talking about when it comes to this story that is still ongoing, even though COVID, if we can believe it, was 6 years ago, 2020. It was a worldwide, massive story with countless effects that we're still feeling 6 years later. Businesses shut down, churches closed, schools closed, people dying alone, misinformation about the illness itself, different rates of death given to us that now we know from more information were wrong as well. The fact that they were telling people to stay 6 feet away. Dr. Fauci, a long time ago, admitted that was something they just literally pulled out of a hat. And so now he goes to testify and had to be brought to Congress by subpoena today. He takes the fifth and claims that this is just a personal attack. Now, however you feel about those involved in this hearing, the media should be asking questions, given how big of a story this still is. And Vanessa and I talked about this all the time during COVID. And Vanessa, you and I were going back and forth on the phone, in emails, just appalled, not just at the whole story itself, but the way the media are still handling it today. What are your thoughts this morning? Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's very frustrating, T. It's, more of the same of, being advocates instead of journalists. This is defending something instead of investigating something. And it's very frustrating. Regardless of how you feel about anybody politically, you still should be asking questions. That's what a journalist does. You ask questions, and he should be held accountable. They should be demanding that he answer these questions. Instead, we found out just not even an hour ago that he pleaded the Fifth, and then he's not going to be questioned, stating, "Oh, I respect the legislators so much that I'm going to plead the Fifth." And because this is just a hunt for me. No, this is people seeking truth, and it's the same thing that many people were asking in 2020, like you and I and so many other people on social media platforms. I mean, doctors who questioned him, other infectious disease specialists who questioned him were being silenced and shut down, and basically their licenses threatened. I mean, it got so ugly for anybody who challenged this guy. And why would one person in the whole world really set the tone of how we proceed with this pandemic? I mean, why is there one doctor being the voice for the entire world? I mean, and the media just went along with it.
Well, and I remember you telling me that you were just posting on Facebook, okay, as a reporter, why are we, as you said, why are we just concentrating on one person and his opinion? And you were just raked over the coals as if you were the devil incarnate.
And I was asking the very questions by the very people who were attacking me should have been asking, because they were the reporters. I mean, the very people who responded most viciously were the reporters. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm just doing your job. This is what you should be doing. And T, I remember the story I wrote in your book, Listening for God, came out of that experience. Right. Because of what I was going through. I remember posting a video from two doctors being interviewed by an ABC affiliate in California who basically were challenging Fauci. And I posted it, and I said, hey, local doctors in Michigan, what are your thoughts on these two doctors? And I could not believe the attacks. I'm like, all I'm asking is what local doctors would, like, what they think. I mean, these doctors were challenged. And one reporter responded, why are you giving credit for a publication that's not even credible? I said, an ABC affiliate in California is now not credible. I mean, I don't understand. Right. Right. And so, what are you talking about? Because it's not CNN. What's your point? And so I could not believe how many people challenged me. In fact, there's two or three reporters still today that won't even speak to me because of my questions in COVID. And T, I merely was asking questions. Right. You know what I mean? Of our governor here on her protocols. Where was her data and science that she claimed existed for her decisions to lock down our state and tell people they can't go to family members on Thanksgiving? And
remember, not too long ago, Gretchen Whitmer came out, and you and I were talking about that as well. She came out and said she had bad information. Yeah,
because you couldn't even back up that. We knew that. And the reporters weren't even questioning her. And in fact, the reporters who tried to question her were no longer invited to the press conferences. So, I mean, we have to stop putting these politicians on some kind of pedestal. They owe us. They have to be held accountable. They work for us. And so many people are still suffering because of COVID aftermath, right? Psychologically, financially, emotionally. There's so much repercussions. I mean, churches still are not at where they were pre-COVID. People are still not going back to Mass. I mean, our Catholic faith suffered around the country because of the lockdown.
And the world, right?
The world, all over the world. I mean, we knew that, depression, anxiety were on the rise. Kids were committing suicide, drugs, alcohol, pornography, all on the rise. I mean, people dying in nursing homes. And we don't have a right to question this man, and what the media is doing today is just going along with it, saying, "Oh, this is political. This is political." No,
well, what's so frustrating is for example, what came out in these documents. He bragged about having dinner with Jake Tapper from CNN and his wife at Jake Tapper's house. At the same time, he was telling people that it was going to be, I'm paraphrasing somewhat, it was going to be a lonely Thanksgiving and holiday season because unless you know that everyone in your family is vaccinated, then you can't be with anyone. So he was isolating everyone else, but similar to what Gavin Newsom was doing and going to dinner with all the politicians at that fancy restaurant and the other politicians who were getting their hair done during the whole thing. But no, I can go and do what I want. And then Jake Tapper also comes out and writes a book about Biden and Biden's condition in terms of the fact that he was, failing mentally and physically after the fact, and writes a book and makes money on it and says, well, yeah, we knew all along. Well, this is ridiculous. This is supposed to be the media. They call themselves journalists. And outside of someone like a Jake Tapper, who obviously took advantage of the situation with Fauci and is not willing to come clean about this now, don't the media feel that they've been sold a bill of goods? I would be really upset if I supported, if I didn't challenge Fauci because I thought, okay, he has somewhat of a good history in terms of what he's done medically prior to the whole COVID controversy. They relied on him, and he sold them a bill of goods.
Yeah. And you know what? Unfortunately, journalists don't have licensing like lawyers and doctors. You can't revoke them. I mean, I think he lost complete and total credibility. How can anybody take this guy at more than a grain of salt is beyond me. I mean, the fact that he's having dinner with this guy and he's on his same network telling people you can't go to Thanksgiving with your family, but look, you come to my house and have dinner. That's okay.
Right.
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And you're right, T. If I was a reporter at that time, believing everything this guy said, I would be upset. But see, why can't they come out there and challenge him and say, this was wrong? You owe us an explanation.
Right.
And to your point offline, stop calling it diaries as if it was he was sitting in his bedroom writing notes to himself.
Right.
I mean,
with a cup of tea.
Yeah, with a cup of tea. These were notes he was making on a government computer.
During the crisis.
Diary.
Yeah.
During the crisis. This is not a personal diary sitting in your bedroom. And that's how they got the information because it was on a government computer. It's subject to FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. So they were able to get these documents because of that. And the reporters know that. The reporters know that this is through FOIA. So stop calling it a diary.
And they're making it sound, the reporters they got the memo. They got the memo as they've gotten the memo so many times, such as on the transgender agenda, such as on abortion. And they got the memo and said, okay, this is how we're going to play this story. And they're going to continue with the old storyline. And they're not going to be speaking the truth. It is all about a government partisan controversy. This whole thing just needs to be ignored. Nothing to look at here. And all we're saying, V, is, look, okay, ask Senator Paul Rand. Why now? Why are you doing this now? Ask him, is this something that you're just going after because there's always been, an edginess between you and Fauci? Because Rand Paul is a doctor, is a medical doctor as well. Ask him. But ask him, for crying out loud. Don't dismiss it. That is your job. And I would encourage people who may not think that maybe V and I are off the mark here. Go look up the Catechism on the use of social communications media and see what the church says about truth and about honesty in reporting and journalism. Thanks, V. We'll be right back. 27 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Catholic Connection on a Wednesday morning, July 29th. And great to have the Miracle Hunter back with us. Of course, it's always great to talk with him. He does such a great job of helping us understand how the church works, especially when it comes to saints and miracles. Michael O'Neill, of course, one of our very own, hosting our programs here on EWTN radio and TV segments. So, Michael, this is really interesting. We have two cases that are out there, starting with apparitions of Our Lady in Germany, and then an interesting phenomenon with a statue of St. Padre Pio in southern Italy. So why don't we start in Germany? What's happening there?
Well, I think what's noteworthy about this particular case is this is the very first time since the 2024 norms, the new rules that the church has established to look at apparitions, that it's doing an initial investigation into an ongoing apparition. There have been any number of cases, perhaps 10 or 15, where the Catholic Church has looked at older cases that have been going on and have ceased, except for Medjugorje. But they've looked at the old cases and applied the new norms and given new judgments. But it's all been kind of old news, in my opinion. This is new news. This is an ongoing Marian apparition where this is the first canonical investigation into it using these new rules by the church. So from the miracle hunter point of view, this is very exciting.
So what's happening in terms of the apparitions? Where are they? What are folks claiming is happening with our Blessed Mother?
So this is in Sievernich, which is in Western Germany, and it relates to this visionary, or alleged visionary, Manuela Strack. And she's born in 1967. She's married and a mother, and she's been reporting these various mystical experiences since childhood, but more frequent in the 1990s and beyond. But I think that the first big apparition was claimed on November 1st in the year 2000, and she claimed that Mary appeared to her inside this St. John the Baptist Church in Sievernich. And there's been 25 apparitions from 2000 to 2002, and then there was a long break from 2006 all the way to more recently, so almost a 20-year gap. And those are visions of the child Jesus now. And she's claimed all these various phenomena, apparitions, locutions, and messages, and visions of not only Jesus and Mary, but St. Michael, St. Padre Pio, St. Charbel, and various other saints. So she's got, there's a lot going on in this particular case. We don't see that typically. Normally it's just Mary. Occasionally one more saint might appear, but she's got the whole team showing up for this one, according to the claims. So what's fascinating is that the local bishop has now, under these new norms, sent this to the Vatican, and the Vatican's actually going to investigate, which is remarkable in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm reading from a couple of news stories that are out there, including one from Senator Siena. What makes both, and you mentioned this, but what makes both the Italian and German cases noteworthy is not simply the extraordinary nature of the claims, but the Church's determination to investigate them carefully rather than embrace or dismiss them prematurely. The prudence is rooted in centuries of experience. Contrary to popular perception, Catholics are not required to believe in private revelation, even when they receive church approval. The faith itself rests on divine revelation contained in Scripture and tradition. Apparitions, visions, and miraculous signs may encourage believers, but they add nothing essential to the deposit of faith. So what do you think is so unique about these that the Church is so determined to investigate, Michael?
Well, I think that, in my opinion anyway, I think they released these norms in 2024 in order to be able to give a judgment on Medjugorje, the long-standing claimed Marian apparitions out of Bosnia-Herzegovina since 1981 to the 6 children and now adults. And I believe that is the whole reason that the norms came to be. And then I think they tried to apply these norms at the request of various bishops to get sort of because they have 6 categories now, and they tested them out a little bit, I think, over the last 2 years and applied them to past cases. And now I think they feel comfortable with the opportunity to apply them to future cases or ongoing cases. And so this is what we're seeing, that the Church feeling sort of confident in having used these norms a little bit, riding the bike a little bit. Now they've taken it out for a spin, and now they're going to go apply that to an ongoing case that hasn't yet been investigated.
Okay, so let's say in Germany for a while before we move to Campania, where the situation with the Padre Pio statue was developing. Now, the diocese there has established a commission in Germany to investigate the reports of the apparitions in the village, as you mentioned, a tiny village of only about 500 people. And it's chaired by canon lawyer and church-state relations expert Stefan Mukel, and includes 4 specialists tasked with examining events that have attracted attention for more than 2 decades. Of course, I'm reading from one of the Wire stories on this. The reported apparitions, as you said, date back to the early 2000s when a local woman claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to her in a parish church of St. John the Baptist, dressed in white and covered by a long veil. According to her testimony, the messages emphasize the themes familiar throughout Marian spirituality: prayer, conversion, and care for those in need. It is interesting that the messages are so similar. I'm not saying this is true. We don't know this. We'll leave it up to the Church to decide. But whenever our Blessed Mother does appear in the approved apparitions, she's always saying what? Go back to my son, go back to Mass, pray, and help people. I mean, it's just she needs, we're not listening apparently too well, so she needs to tell us over and over again. But that message does appear repeatedly with the approved apparitions with Our Lady.
Absolutely. And I think that this falls in line with that in so many ways. The conversion, frequent confession, Eucharistic devotion, adoration, rosary, penance, divine mercy, all these things make it into the messages, which is so interesting. But I think a little bit of a red flag in my book, or a potential red flag, is some of these messages contain apocalyptic themes. And so I think, of course, we always have to have our eyes on the end prize of getting to heaven in the end times. However, that's always kind of a little bit of a red flag when the church sees those things. So obviously, we've seen cases that have been approved with that, but we also have to keep our eyes on that aspect of these messages.
I think it's so powerful for us, and I feel so safe being in the one holy, being in the bark of Peter, because of the efforts the church takes, the length that she goes to make sure that we are not being misled.
Absolutely. And I think that anytime anything passes the muster of the church, it's a little bit of a miracle, in my opinion, that it passes all the process, because they're so strict and the rules are so tight that anything that makes it through these very famous cases of Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, and a handful of others, we can feel full confidence in these, that these are authentic happenings that the church has actually recognized. But the church is very, very careful and takes a long time. But under the new norms, things should move quite a bit faster, I would imagine.
I'm glad that they're investigating these different phenomena. We'll talk about Padre Pio next. But to me, when I hear these stories, I really hope people will realize, and you just mentioned, Guadalupe, Fatima, Lourdes, all these amazing places with approved apparitions, and that more people would look into the approved apparitions and go to those places. And I'm not saying they eventually can't, believe in this, but even though we don't have to believe in a private revelation, but to go to the places where there are confirmed miracles and the real documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's so important to stay focused on those things that the church has done its investigation on. Everybody's excited about the latest and greatest, and we are doing a story about these Sievernick apparitions, which are the latest and greatest, you might say. However, it's so important to just stay faithful to the church's judgment and its prudence, and we'll find out one way or another soon enough what we're dealing with here.
And sometimes it takes a little bit longer than we would like, right, Michael? But we have to be patient.
Well, yes, exactly. What's very interesting is that traditionally, since the previous norms in 1978 and prior to that, it would often take decades for the church to give a judgment. And a lot of faithful became impatient and started having their own opinions about these things, which would be natural. We should use our own discernment in lieu of the church's official statement. However, with these new norms, the church no longer declares anything supernatural. And so we can go with that at this point.
All right, we will go down to Campania in southern Italy for the phenomenon around a statue of Padre Pio, with Michael's description of what's happening, what the church is doing to investigate. It's Michael O'Neill, the Miracle Hunter, with us this morning on a Wednesday. We'll be right back. Michael's website is miraclehunter.com. Again, miraclehunter.com. And his wonderful program airs right here on EWTN Radio, 7 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. And Michael, you did mention you're going to be doing something on your radio program on the Marian apparitions in Germany, right?
Correct.
And that coming up soon or in a few weeks? When can we look forward to that?
So that'll be Saturday, this coming Saturday.
Oh, good. Okay.
Where this one airs, and I'll be talking about this one and spending a lot of detail on it, because I think it's a new story, and I think it's worth people knowing about.
All right, so we go from Germany down to southern Italy in the region of Campania, which part of it is along, of course, the Mediterranean, and this little town of Casalba near Naples has become an unexpected destination for pilgrims and journalists, and as the article from Zenit says, simply the curious. A fiberglass statue of St. Padre Pio reportedly began displaying a reddish tear-like drop beneath one eye. Do explain. What do we know about this?
Well, it's interesting. So this comes to us from April. April 18th is the day of the report, but this priest, Father Girolamo Capuano, he noticed this red tear beneath the left eye of a fiberglass statue of Padre Pio, and he assumed it was dirt or paint because that would be the normal explanation. But he attempted to wipe it away, and that failed, he said. But what's very interesting is that he wanted to sort of verify that this wasn't just some hoax or some trickster sneaking in with an eyedropper and dropping in a drop of blood or paint. So he reviewed all the video footage, to the security camera footage, to make sure that there was nothing there. And that's he didn't find anything from that. So it is being tested currently for blood. However, the results are not publicly available. And the investigation has taken custody of that statue, and they're looking into it to see if it's actually human blood or another substance. So, of course, we're always cautious with these claims, but it is an interesting one and catching some attention there in Italy.
Well, what's really interesting is that he's someone who he said he checked and rechecked because they have cameras in the church.
Yes.
And on the day when it supposedly happened, he reviewed everything and didn't see any funny business, no one going in trying to maybe put a piece of paint or a drop of paint on the statue, anything dripping from the ceilings or something. And so he checked and rechecked all the video. But it was beautiful because he talks about how, regardless of whether this is a miracle, it really has attracted people, and he's seeing a new interest in the church. So that could be maybe the reason why this happened. Who knows, right?
Absolutely. We don't know whether this is a quote-unquote true miracle, but it's always beautiful when these little things happen, true or not, inspire the faithful and draw them to the church, draw them to the faith. And everybody has all Catholics have sort of this supernatural understanding that we have a supernatural faith. And so when we see these little moments, even hints of them or suggestions that they might be true, it makes us run back to what we already know to be true, and it kind of enlivens our faith. So true or not, I think we need to get to the bottom of it, but it's beautiful that people are paying attention.
Yeah, let me just read a couple of the comments. The phenomenon was first noticed, as you mentioned, April 18th. The parish priest initially assumed it was dirt or some accidental stain, yet repeated attempts to remove it proved unsuccessful, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. After reviewing security footage covering the entire month, he concluded no one had physically altered the statue. The local diocese is now investigating whether the substance is in fact blood. For the priest, the episode has already produced one undeniable effect. It has rekindled prayer and attracted people who might otherwise never enter a church. Even so, he readily acknowledges that ecclesiastical recognition is far from certain. And again, his caution reflects a lesson learned not only by the church, but by his own community. The same town experienced excitement in 2015 when reports spread that a statue of the Virgin Mary was weeping, and subsequent investigations determined that rainwater infiltration was responsible.
Yeah, that's right. These things happen all the time. There are claims of these things all the time. Some are true, and the majority have a natural explanation. So, but like we say, I think that's beautiful that people are paying attention and that their faith is enlivened by this.
You know, my hope is that, okay, so people come back and they're curious and they get struck by something, they start going to Mass again, but will they be, strong enough in terms of to be able to stay if this proves just to be some sort of a natural situation?
Correct. And I think that's, in so many ways, that's the point of all miracles, true and potential miracles, is that they crack the door open for faith. They shouldn't be the basis of our faith, but if they bring us to Christ in a deeper way and open that door, I think there's some value to it in all of it, no matter what.
What prompted, going back to your own journey, because you know so much about this in this process, what prompted your original interest in all the different miracles in the church, Michael?
Well, I would probably trace it to two different points. One being that in 1988, I remember in religion class as a child, the Shroud of Turin became the subject of our religion teacher's fascination and sort of presented to us all the results and all the investigations. And as a young boy, I thought that was pretty fascinating, and that kind of got me a little bit interested. But even prior to that, my own mother had a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it was her devotion and telling me about the miracles of the tilma and those apparitions and all those stories. They really piqued my interest, and that sort of set me off as a youngster and to considering that to be the second greatest story ever told. And even last year when I was standing in front of the real tilma, 1 inch away, which was such a blessing to do that. It just reminded me of my mother had taught me and what inspired me to walk down this long path that has taken me to do this all on EWTN and otherwise, investigating miracles and presenting their stories.
It's interesting. We're in the month of July, and this is the month of the precious blood of Jesus. And I was encouraging people to visit some of these, or at least online, some of these wonderful presentations that have been put together, especially, for example, by St. Carlo Acutis on Eucharistic miracles. And in terms of blood, wouldn't you say that Lanciano was one of the best to investigate and to read about in terms of the precious blood of our Lord?
Absolutely. Lanciano,
in addition to the shroud, obviously. Right.
Sure. But for Eucharistic miracles, Lanciano will always be the gold standard. And as we've talked about in this show before, when you go to visit there in Lanciano, the Church of the Miracle, you can walk right up and genuflect and kneel in front of that specimen, that host, which science has validated as to be true human flesh with true human blood, those globules. So it's truly, and the investigations that have gone into that are far more advanced than anything else in the whole world. So it's truly the place of Eucharistic miracles. And as Carlo Acutis has pointed out, as I've done now on my website, if you go to eucharisticmiracles.com, that takes you to my section on Eucharistic miracles. But you can also watch on Explore with the Miracle Hunter. I have 5 or so episodes on some of these very famous cases. So it's truly an amazing thing. Yeah.
Talking with Miracle Hunter Michael O'Neill. Of course, you can hear him every Saturday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on EWTN Radio, and check out his really cool website, miraclehunter.com. Again, miraclehunter.com. One of the things I think that some people say, and when we take people, and you've probably had this from your own pilgrims and the trips that you do, is when they go to a place like Lanciano for the Eucharistic miracle, they say, why doesn't the church promote this more? Why isn't the church out there with a big sign, a big marquee, come and see this Eucharistic miracle? And why do you think that is, where the church is very much like Jesus is, and come and see, very subtle about these things?
Well, it's quite interesting because I think, number one, miracles aren't what our faith is based on. I mean, obviously we have the incarnation and the resurrection, the bookend miracles, you might say, for our faith, and those are so important. But all these instances of private revelation and otherwise, they help our faith, but they're not essential. And so I think the church's lack of promotion, you might say, is kind of rooted in that. But it's also important to say that going forward, I'd love to see a further solidification of the process of investigation of Eucharistic miracles specifically. At each local diocese, they have their own scientists, their own process, right. And each local bishop gives his own opinion. But not until 2024 is all that routed through the Vatican, and the Vatican will now make decisions on Eucharistic miracles. So the process hasn't been tuned up, as you might say, or lined up so that everything is exactly the same. And I think people in the scientific community and otherwise would appreciate that kind of attention to detail.
It's interesting because some of these miracles are, like within the Catholic world, I would say Lanciano is very well known. But the Eucharistic miracle in Siena is not very well known.
Correct. And I was just there last year, and a beautiful Eucharistic miracle as well. And I think there could be a television program, the Eucharistic Miracles of Italy, because there are so many, and they have so many fascinating backstories and interesting elements. But most people don't know these stories, and I think they should know. And I'm actually working on a book with EWTN that'll be out this year called Miracles of the Eucharist. So I hope to inspire some more interest in that, because I think it's an important aspect of our faith.
Tell us about the Eucharistic miracle in Siena. We've been there many times, and we've had the opportunity to see the miracle itself. The priest brought it out from behind the tabernacle. It is a fascinating story.
So are you asking about the Siena miracle, or the?
Yes, the Siena miracle. The Siena miracle. Yeah.
Yep. So in the case of Siena, this is one of these cases where hosts were stolen from the church, and there was a theft in the year 1730, I believe, August 14th, where these thieves broke into the Basilica of San Francesco, and they stole a ciborium that had 350 or so consecrated hosts. And everybody in Siena was shocked at this, of course. This was a big deal. And they looked for days and days. And 3 days later, I think they saw some light coming from the fields, and they were able to recover this. But they also noticed that the parishioner noticed something inside the alms box of the nearby church, and hidden in there, where the hosts were there. And so they led a procession back to the main church when they found it in the other church. And this has been remarkable because these hosts, having been in this condition since 1730, have not decayed, have not gotten mold, have not had any sort of deterioration as we might expect scientifically. And so this is kind of a miracle of the discovery of the hosts, but also of the miraculous preservation of the hosts. And you can go there in Siena and see these very hosts even today.
Yeah, and it's in the Church of St. Francis in Siena, and it's kind of off the beaten path, so you have to kind of walk a little ways outside of the main area where you see, you have the Pienza del Campo, and you have, St. Dominic's and with St. Catherine Siena's relics, and then you have, of course, your home and all that beautiful, the scenery in Piazza del Campo and the beautiful streets of Siena. But you have this Church of St. Francis that is tucked off the side in kind of a quiet area, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's off the beaten path, and it's around the corner where you actually see this Eucharistic miracle. And my experience with Eucharistic miracles is I've visited any number of them around the world, and it's always the same, that these Eucharistic miracles might have their own little chapel on the side, but there are no big signs that say, come check it out. You kind of have to know where to go, and once you're there, of course, you're in the presence of a double miracle, you might say, our Lord in the Eucharist and this Eucharistic miracle that happened. So just like in Siena, each of the famous cases, they're kind of tucked off to the side a little bit, with the exception of Lanciano, which is front and center. But the other places I've been to, they have their own little chapel on the side.
And you've seen the Eucharistic miracle in Siena, correct?
I have. I was there last year, actually, filming. And so we'll be doing a new episode of Explore with the Miracle Hunter related to Siena, probably coming out next year. So I love these stories of Eucharistic miracles, and it's a true honor to get to bring them to the world, especially for people who don't know about them. It's kind of fun to get the emails and the responses where people said, why don't more people know about this? And so it's fun to tell those stories.
And you look at the Eucharist, you look at the hosts, and they're like brand new, Michael.
Correct. Yeah, all these nearly 200 years later, or more than 200 years later, it's truly amazing to see them. And I think that we would expect something different scientifically, but there they are preserved. So there are various types of Eucharistic miracles, but this is a unique one, and so it's fun to see.
So when is the book coming out from EWTN Publishing?
This will be out this year, so perhaps by the end of the year. So I'm excited for this one because I'm presenting all the cases of the scientific investigations into Eucharistic miracles. And I've done these episodes around the world where I've investigated them and talked to the scientists, the doctors, the parish priests, the witnesses, and all that's going right into the book. And it's going to be a good exploration, unlike anything that's out there already, that looks at these highly investigated cases and presents the data on them. So I'm excited to do that.
Awesome. Well, you have to come back on when the book comes out. I want to talk about that. Definitely. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you and look forward to your show this weekend.
Thank you.
The Miracle Hunter talking about two cases being investigated by the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, apparitions in Germany, and a teardrop on a beautiful statue of St. Padre Pio in Campania. We'll be right back. Hope you enjoyed today's program. We enjoyed being with you in both hour number 1 and hour number 2 here on EWTN's Radio Extra and EWTN Global Catholic Radio. Coming up tomorrow, of course, it is a Thursday, which means our Cultural Connections. 2 segments with the one, the only Father Mitch Pacwa. And he has been doing a lot with us, if you recall, on the importance of discernment. And I want to chat with him about that in light of the secular media's response to these latest revelations about COVID and Anthony Fauci. This is not about a political party situation, as Vanessa and I mentioned earlier. This is about understanding how the media work, as Archbishop Chaput used to always say, so they don't work on us. And unfortunately, they are working on us. So much that happened during COVID had to do with the way the media handled the story and the fear factor and the lies and the lack, as Vanessa said, of questioning. And think about, as Vanessa also said when she was on with us for 2 cents this morning, the impact it had on the Catholic Church. We're still struggling getting people back in the pews, and that was 6 years ago. So that will be a very important topic with Father Mitch Pacwa. Then we're also going to be discussing a new film with Mary Bowen, and it'll be a great Catholic production that we'll discuss with you. And, of course, much more on tomorrow's program on a Thursday. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to talking to you tomorrow on a Thursday and, God willing, on a Friday as well. Ciao, ciao.